Hey everyone, welcome back to DWeb Decoded, a podcast by Filecoin Foundation that explores the intersection of blockchain and the data economy. I'm your host, Aaron Stanley, and today I'm joined by Marta Piekarska-Geater, who many of you know as MPG, who's Executive Director at FIDL Labs. So today we're going to be talking about FIDL, the Filecoin Plus program, and the role that both of these play in the Filecoin ecosystem. Marta, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So you have a super impressive background in the worlds of both open source software and blockchain. So I'd love to start off by just having you introduce yourself, talk a bit about your career journey and how you found your way to the world of Filecoin.
Sure. My background is in computer security and privacy. I did a double master's, started my education in Poland, where I'm from, and then moved to Germany, to Berlin, and I did my second master's degree and a PhD in focus on user-centered privacy design or tooling for privacy. But by coincidence, accidents, wonderful life, I was contacted by a person that I met while I was running a project with Mozilla, who just established a new company, and it was kind of really interesting stuff, but he wouldn't tell me more. And then we went out for lunch, and he brought half of the team, and they all showed up, and they were like blue hair, leather jackets. It was all in San Francisco, of course, and like all this wonderful and crazy crowd. And I just fell in love with it. What the company was Blockstream.
Oh, wow.
They were talking about Bitcoin. I had no idea what Bitcoin was. Like, probably knew as much as any other person that read the news. It was in 2014. So I decided just joining as a security architect and spent almost 2 years in Blockstream. So consider myself incredibly lucky, because if talking about introduction to blockchain and Web3, I don't think you could have better. And then I met Brian Bellendorf, Executive Director of Hyperledger, who was back then just one-man show and Linux Foundation, establishing this new enterprise blockchain platform. And I really appreciated his thoughts and kind of process how he was thinking about bringing blockchain to the enterprises. So I joined him as Director of Ecosystem at Hyperledger, where I was there for 4.5 years, which I think for Web3 world is insanely long time. And to be honest, when I was then interviewing for other jobs, I was quite often asked, how come you spent there 4.5 years? Like, there must be something wrong with you. But yeah, it was a great journey and I loved it. But it was just time to go on. And then I started my kind of private consulting business, ended up working with a bunch of very interesting Web3 companies, moved mostly towards DAO governance and looking at kind of community building and all that kind of the core of what Web3 is about, other than the technology, of course. Then again, wonderful stars shining over me. I was contacted by Protocol Labs if I would like to join and establish FIDL, or back then it was called, the concept of the team was called Data Preservation Labs. But we've changed the name, I think, 4 times in the process of establishing the company.
Well, I like FIDL. It has a nice, sort of fun vibe to it, right? That's maybe a bit more engaging than Data Protection Labs. But I was going to say, like with Blockstream, of all the places to enter into crypto and Bitcoin in 2014, like Blockstream, that would have been, I guess, I don't know how many students of the block size wars we have watching this podcast, but that was sort of we were definitely on the front lines for a couple of years there, I would have assumed.
Oh yeah.
It was fun. Yeah, hey, that's how you learn, right? It's just drinking from the fire hose, I suppose. I remember talking to Austin Hill. I met him. I knew him in Montreal. I spent some time in Montreal back in those days, so I knew him reasonably well, and just some of the stories he was telling about the block size. That whole period of time just seems just insane, which was outside the scope of this podcast. Maybe we'll leave that for a follow up. But anyway, but like you've definitely had quite the journey in crypto now. So definitely excited to learn more about what you're working on with FIDL. So maybe tell us a bit, like, first of all, like, what does FIDL stand for? What is it? What role does it play in the Filecoin ecosystem right now?
Yeah. So many of you listening to this podcast probably know that Protocol Labs decided to kind of go through this process of nucleation, where a lot of the teams that were internal became separate companies. FIDL stands for Filecoin Incentive Design Labs, and was basically spun out or incubated by Protocol Labs and Filecoin Foundation to support the operations of the Phil Plus program. And by operations, I don't mean the governance side of things. There is a Phil Plus governance team that absolutely focuses on making sure that the program is running well, but rather building the tooling, the dashboards, establishing metrics to kind of quantify how well is the program running, and then building all of those things that will help us track it, verify whether changes that are being implemented are better or worse, or making it better or worse, and tooling that enables people to participate in the program easier, be it, onboard data easier, receive data cap easier, or, just operate their allocators.
That's super interesting. And yeah, it's an important distinction, like the governance side versus the operations side, right? They're kind of two different things that, two pedals on the same bike essentially, but two different functions. And we've never actually done an episode just focusing on the Filecoin Plus program, or Phil Plus as it's more colloquially known. Maybe could you just give us an overview of like, what is this program exactly? And maybe what are some of the key component parts of it? I know we hear these words thrown around a lot, like allocators and data cap and multipliers and all these things. But maybe can you help us kind of package this all together, and how do you articulate, like, what is the role this program serves?
Absolutely. So the primary goal of Phil Plus program is to incentivize useful, verifiable storage on the Filecoin network. So we kind of aim to distinguish between speculative and real world storage, and reward providers who store data that can be audited and verified as valuable. This is done by a process called, or by giving data cap to clients, who then can choose to pay for the storage with the addition of data cap, or just purely with data cap. So I know it's a little bit complicated because there are like three themes here, or three participants. But basically, the idea is that there is a group of people that are in charge of verifying applications and analyzing applications that come into the program from clients who have data. So I, as the person who have data, I would like to store data on Filecoin. And I can obtain data cap through Phil Plus program, and then use this data cap to pay for the storage to a storage provider. And of course, I'm going to choose the best storage provider that provides the best SLAs and so on and so forth. And because I give them data cap, first of all, as a client, the benefit for me is that possibly I can pay less for the storage, or maybe the storage provider will only take the data cap and that's sufficient to them. But there is like this discount element for clients. And for storage providers, the benefit is that by obtaining data cap, they 10x their power on the network for the purposes of block reward mining. So now I have 10 times higher chance of winning the block reward than a person who did not deal with data cap attached to it. That doesn't mean 10 times more block reward. It means the 10 times higher chance of winning a block reward.
Got it. Yeah, I think that's been a point of confusion for some in the ecosystem. And I think it's like you get a 10x, like the size of your block reward is 10x, but in reality, you have a 10x higher likelihood of winning the block reward than if you were not taking a Phil Plus deal, essentially. And then maybe talk a bit about like maybe some of the theory behind like why this program was introduced? Like maybe what was the kind of the problem that it was solving, and why was it determined that like the best way to address this problem was using the Phil Plus, this vehicle here?
Yeah. So caveat, I've joined Filecoin ecosystem a year ago, so all of it for me, I can tell you all of the origin stories from Bitcoin, but for Filecoin, I've heard those stories from other people who have been, and I'm extremely lucky to have as our CTO a person that is very well known in the Filecoin ecosystem, Will Scott, who has been with Protocol Labs for I think 5 or 6 years now. So I hope that he gives me the true stories there, but never know. So as I understand it, shortly after the mainnet launch, we recognized that incentivizing long-term utility-driven storage will be really important for success and actually attracting meaningful use cases and preventing purely speculative behavior that would destabilize the network's economy. Because the challenge with Filecoin, to a degree, as obviously all of you know, is that we have storage providers that purely are interested in using Filecoin as a consensus mechanism and just mining the block rewards. And then there are storage providers and clients and all of the, I guess, Filecoin core ecosystem that believe that the mission of Filecoin is to store humanity's most important information for the for future. So these are two very different attitudes if you think about it. One mostly looks at it from an economic perspective, the other looks at it from more philosophical and mission-driven perspective. So Phil Plus aims to establish a situation where, for a rational actor, the best solution is to, even if you are purely focused on the financial aspects or the economic aspects of Filecoin, your rational behavior will contribute to the mission of Filecoin being storing the most important information for the future of humanity.
Got it. And then, and maybe just kind of piggybacking on that, like, why would you say that like Phil Plus is really critical to a healthily functioning Filecoin ecosystem right now? Like this importance of getting this emphasis on like real, like valuable, verified data sets onto the network, as opposed to maybe what would be happening if we didn't have this incentive system in place.
I think that the important part here is that we are still at the verge of like communicating to the world utility of Filecoin compared to other storage systems. And in order to do that, we need storage providers that can meet very similar SLAs, service level agreements, that will deliver quality of service to clients storing data with them. And because we are decentralized, there is no mechanism that AWS or Google Cloud could introduce of like, unless our servers are this way, then you can't we as company are connected to the success of this business, so we will ensure the quality of the servers. And if the hardware is terrible, then we'll just replace the hardware. In the decentralized system, we don't have those levers, right? We don't have a person that could say, no, if you're a storage provider that can't deliver certain SLAs, then you don't get to participate. We only can work on the incentive part of it, saying if you're a storage provider that does deliver the quality, you will receive extra incentives to that. And that is very important, as I mentioned, for just wider market adoption, because, if I'm, in our staple example, if I'm CERN and I want to store data from the Hadron Collider, I do need to know that the data is safe, that data is immutable, that it will be retrievable, maybe not as a hot storage, maybe not instantly, but at one point when we want to do the research, we do need to retrieve the data. And in other cases, if you're someone who is storing video and building some kind of a platform for streaming videos, then you need to know that that those videos will be available when users request them. You can't wait 3 weeks and then give it back to them. So I think that the key element here is to think of the difference between centralized and decentralized systems, where centralized systems can very easily work based off rules and restrictions and kind of policing, while decentralized systems only work really well when they are built using good, well-structured incentive models and encouragement of behavior that, by being rational, actually becomes the correct behavior or the good behavior.
Yeah, I love how you put that, and it kind of dovetails into my next question, which I'm going to give a bit of a preamble to. But basically, when we're thinking about trying to attract, Web 2 clients and data sets to Filecoin, we have to provide at least, be able to at least guarantee like a baseline level of service provision across the network, which, as you're describing, is in a decentralized network, we can't go around and necessarily just police and make sure that, okay, everybody has the proper hardware, everybody has the proper systems and tools in place, or the proper service, kind of SLA in place. So you need to really lean into more I guess you're thinking about in terms of like carrots and sticks, on the incentive front. Like we need more carrots than, we don't necessarily have as many sticks to use, I guess, to go and police people. We need more carrots, or better carrots. But how do you see all of this maybe playing into the end goal of really just attracting more Web 2 data sets to the Filecoin network?
So I guess we are now today a year since we started with FIDL. I am much more optimistic than I was a year ago because we have many more teams that are focusing on onboarding Web 2 data, serving as so-called on-ramps, right? Teams that reach out and build relationship with the Web 2 customers, and then bring that back to Filecoin. There is also obviously, a long way to go because we do need that smoothness of client onboarding. But that's partially something that FIDL is kind of focusing and working on. We are, by participating in Fill Plus. So on one hand, we build the tools, we build the dashboards. On the other hand, we also run to allocators because we want to kind of dog food the system and understand the pain points and understand how can we be improving that. And so through that, we now understand much better, having very interesting clients and working with them, how hard it is to onboard data or retrieve data from Filecoin. And that is kind of something where we are doing our little part here by developing better tooling, looking at things like data preparation. How can we build something that will enable then an auditor to verify that the data that someone said that they will onboard is the data that then landed on the network, by including some preparation processes that will be reversible, or maybe not reversible, but checkable, right? So think like zero knowledge proofs kind of stuff.
Got it. And then as we're looking ahead to 2025 here, so you've been in this role for about a year. FIDL's been kind of establishing itself as an entity. You're kind of getting everything, all the baseline infrastructure in place here, et cetera, and kind of getting up to speed and everything. But as you're looking ahead to 2025, I mean, what do you see? What are some of like the core initiatives and challenges that FIDL is looking at and approaching in 2025? And are there any kind of targets or goals that you guys have in mind that you'd like folks to know about?
Yeah. First, I think we really do want to improve the efficiency of data cap process. So today, if you want to be able to give out data cap, you need to become an allocator. For that, you apply to the governance team. The governance team reviews your proposal of how will you verify your clients, how will you make sure that the clients and the storage providers are held accountable to what they promised that they will do. And then you get small bits of data cap kind of to test it, to prove yourself, right? So at first you get 5 pips of data cap. Once you start running out, there is a refresh process. The governance team reviews what you've done and how you worked with the system, and then if they are satisfied, they will refresh your data cap and they give you 10 pips, and then again same thing. You'll get 20 pips. As I understand, the plan is never to give more than 20 pips, because 20 pips is already a fair chunk of data that needs to be then onboarded. And most importantly, this process of reviewing, the greater the amount of data that has to be analyzed, the more time it takes. And that brings incredible inefficiencies to the system, especially that, a year in, we have quite a few allocators that are now receiving 20 pip chunks of data cap or allocations of data cap. And then the governance team basically spends all time every day just reviewing the applications for refresh and so on. So this is very inefficient. What FIDL will has proposed already to the community, and what we want to work on more, is moving away from those manual allocators that do manual diligence and to move to systems where there are automated allocators, where the verification of whether a client should receive data cap or not is based on some objective measures that can be encoded in a smart contract, and then that just kind of does the process. And by doing that, the review is kind of much more upfront of understanding why is this a good way of automatically allocating data cap. But then the refresh part of it is almost a no-brainer, because we know how that code works. It was audited. The governance team is happy with it. Great. This is an allocator now. So that will be a big part of our thinking for 2025, is what are those pathways? Because obviously, they are all prone to some abuse, and how high that abuse could potentially be is what we need to establish. And this is what we are also constantly encouraging the community to think about. The other work that we are doing is on the compliance side of things. So today already we have very detailed compliance reports for allocators and for clients, where everything is all the checks are automated and the compliance reports are generated, I think, once a day, or upon a request of someone who wants to check it. And then looking at if we can use those compliance reports to kind of automate scoring or create a scoring system, where then, let's say, the bottom 10% or so, the worst performing allocators, do not get their data refreshed, so that the system encourages the absolutely best behavior in order to ensure a smooth data cap process. So these are the two big things that we are looking at. And the third goal for 2025 is to improve the understanding and community understanding and our communications towards the community of what we are doing. Because we've done a huge amount of work, and not only work, but there are outcomes, very measurable outcomes of the work that FIDL has contributed to Phil Plus program. The governance team has significantly changed how the program works as well, but we don't really talk about it. And as you mentioned, you haven't talked about Phil Plus. It's contagious. It's stressful sometimes to talk about Phil Plus. People have different opinions, but a lot of those people, if you talk to them, it turns out that their opinions are based on the historical knowledge, not about based on what happened in the last year. So we really need to make a much better job at communicating what FIDL is doing to build that trust in Phil Plus again.
Yeah, it's great. And coming on the show here is a great first start. So appreciate you coming on to helping us explain some of this. And I think it's, I've been a part of the Filecoin ecosystem for around 3 years now, and I still have really I still struggle like articulating like what Phil Plus exactly is. I think it's just a kind of a complicated program to begin with. There's a lot of kind of new terminology and things that float around, but there's also been a lot of changes. So it's like, okay, what I thought I knew about Phil Plus may not necessarily actually be true right now, which it sounds like that's a theme that you keep running into consistently, is that people have this kind of outdated understanding of what the program is and what's trying to do. But it does seem like it kind of seems like the core challenge, if I can maybe, summarize or try to summarize, is that there's this tension of automation versus human manual review, right? Where, you have, on one hand, you don't necessarily want like individual people sort of being the gatekeepers for these things, but at the same, on the other, just for a variety of reasons. But on the other hand, you have the trying to build these kind of automated tools and things to make the process smoother. But then, whenever there's some sort of automation, there's always some sort of, these things can be vulnerable to being Sybil attacked, or there's some way of kind of gaming the system that you need sort of a human review, a human being to kind of come in and be like, hey, does this look right? Maybe talk a bit about, this might be a kind of a good way to maybe conclude the show here. But I'd like for you to maybe talk about this experience or this dynamic within Phil Plus, and maybe let's draw on your experience of working in open source software for the last 10, 15 years. And like, how does this compare to, other types of scenario? Because I assume this is not a situation as unique to Filecoin. This is something that you will probably find in a lot of other different open source environments as well. But I'd love for you maybe to expand on how does this particular project stack up against some of your previous experiences in this regard?
I think it is unique to Filecoin.
Oh, it is.
Depends on how far you zoom out, right? At the top level, it's all about the friction between mission and economic incentives, or it can focus on the financial aspect of things. I don't want to say greed, but something along those lines, right? So there are people who, in every community, there are people who are extremely driven by the mission and of the project, and there are people who are there just to get rich. And these two are very rarely overlapping. And I guess that's a little bit different to how open source communities that I've known for a long time operated. Because in open source, money wasn't really involved. Like, you had your Red Hats and other teams, but they were actually, the horrible kind of value extracting participants that pure open source participants never appreciated. And here in Web3, it's different because we have that very strong financial element to everything that we do. You don't really have those, volunteer developers or kind of people. There are those people that work only out of passion, but mostly you're kind of expected to be rewarded, to be paid for your work, which is reasonable, right? We all need to buy bread and help our families. Like, I'm taking a salary as well. But this is where I think that challenge always starts. And now Phil Plus, I think that it's actually very interesting how Filecoin community decided to work, like at its core, at its start, say, okay, we do recognize that we have those actors that are more money driven versus those that are more mission driven. So how can we adjust the behavior of those money driven people to actually still contribute to the very positive behavior for the network? And that's rare. Like, I haven't seen that in many communities. Most communities will start thinking, okay, how can we eliminate the behavior that is not contributing? Or they will just shift towards, okay, yes, we should just all shift to our financial inclination, to say. I think that Filecoin is challenging also because the size, it's almost a pun to say, like, with so much great volume of data comes great size of the complexity and just problems that arise from it. I don't think that people that are outside from, like, actually working with Filecoin understand what, one pib of data is and how hard it is to transport that. Like it's for me, like most of the time when I joined, I was like, oh yeah, you just like kind of connect your computer and upload it to the internet. It's like, no. You take a rack and you ship physical hardware to another storage provider because there is no bandwidth in the world to put that data, right? So I think that also adds more complexity because it's a different scale of a problem that we are used to.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I'd be interested, maybe as just a final question here. Do you see like the some of the systems that you guys are designing and some of the lessons you're learning here with respect to Phil Plus being applicable in some of these other like kind of DePIN networks, right, that have become popular in the last 12, 18 months, like some of these kind of decentralized compute? Because I think a lot of these things will ultimately face, maybe these things aren't necessarily at the same level of size and scale as Filecoin right now, but like if these things do work and these distributed GPU networks and compute networks and things, if these do get to the size of Filecoin, I would assume that they're going to run into a lot of these same issues that you guys are encountering and you're trying to find solutions for. But do you see that there's like an applicability there from what you guys have been working on and learning at FIDL?
Yes. However, we first need to really nail down the Phil Plus to work exactly how we need it to work and get the community buy-in before we can start thinking about the adoption in any other ecosystem. So it is definitely like in the back of our head as we're designing some of the tools and thinking about some of those elements and including things like, automated incentive awarding, let's say, right? Using smart contracts for some of those automations and things. These are all things that we definitely are constantly thinking of, like, well, how would we do it if it was in another network, or how can we make it useful to other communities? But right now, I think Phil Plus is an extremely important element of data onboarding to Filecoin. I know that all of the kind of founders of Filecoin are extremely interested in making Phil Plus as the best possible version of itself. Maybe it is, introducing significant changes. Maybe it's designing it from scratch. We always think about those things. We are not absolutely dead focused on the Phil Plus as it is right now. And then we will start thinking about other networks. So, baby steps, nail it here in our little world of Filecoin, and then we'll think of expanding to the world.
Got it. Yeah, got to walk before you, or crawl before you walk, right? As
Yep.
they say. No, hey, well, Marta, I really appreciate you coming on the show here today to fill us in on some of the changes and just some of the updates to the program, helping us better understand how the program works. Really, I mean, this is sort of the lifeblood of Filecoin right now. Is really the bread and butter of the day-to-day operations of just getting data onto the network, getting storage providers incentivized, getting them paid, et cetera, all these things. So congratulations just on the success you guys have had. And thank you again for taking time to help us better understand this critical component of the ecosystem.
It was a pleasure talking to you, Aaron. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And then maybe just as a quick, addendum here, how can folks like find you if they want to either learn more or get involved in some capacity that maybe they're not already?
Yep. So FIDL.tech is our website, and we collect most important information there. Or you can go to phil.org/philplus. That will tell you all about the Phil Plus program. I'm MPG on Slack, so hit me up on Slack. Don't try LinkedIn or Twitter because I am very bad at following those.
Amazing. Well, Marta, I really appreciate your time. Thanks again for coming on the show, and thanks everyone for watching. And we will see you next time on DWeb Decoded.